I thought I had the perfect life in our beautiful Austin home, married to a charming, successful man who swore he adored me. But one night, a single cruel comment shattered that illusion and revealed the monster he truly was. He told me I was weak, that I'd be lost and penniless without him. He had no idea he was talking to a former forensic accountant, and that he'd just given me a reason to start a secret financial crime investigation that would expose his entire life as an elaborate criminal lie. This isn't just another story about betrayal and a toxic marriage. It's a deep dive revenge story about how I used my husband's own suffocating narcissism against him to bring down his entire empire. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The lie I was living in was beautiful. It was tastefully decorated in shades of cream and slate gray, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the rolling green hills west of Austin, Texas. It smelled like fresh linen and diptyque candles, and the expensive single-origin coffee my husband, Julian, insisted on. Our life was a curated masterpiece of quiet affluence, a testament to his success, to our success. At least, that's what I'd allowed myself to believe. The truth, when it finally decided to show itself, didn't arrive with a bang. It wasn't a lipstick-stained collar or a hushed phone call. It was a single piece of paper, innocuously tucked into a stack of mail on the marble island in our kitchen. It was a bank statement, addressed not to Julian or me, but to something called Oakhaven Legacy Partners, LLC. I almost tossed it into the recycling bin, assuming it was junk mail. We were drowning in it lately, but the address was ours, and the logo, a single stylized oak leaf, pricked at my memory. It was the same design as a small, abstract tattoo Julian had gotten on his wrist a year ago. He'd told me it was an homage to the giant oak tree at his childhood home, a symbol of strength and roots. Looking at it now, on this sterile bank document, it felt less like a symbol of roots and more like the mark of a secret. My heart started a low, anxious thrum. For the past decade, first as a professional and then as Julian's wife, my brain had been trained to recognize patterns, to see the single thread that, when pulled, can unravel an entire tapestry of deception. I was a forensic accountant by trade, or I had been. I'd been a rising star at a Big Four firm in Houston, the one they called in when the numbers didn't just look wrong, they felt malicious. I loved the hunt, the cold, clean logic of it. Then I met Julian. He was charisma personified, a dazzling smile, a quick wit, and a vision for a life so compelling I'd packed up my own to become a supporting character in his. He was a wealth manager, building a boutique firm that catered to Austin's new tech money and old oil families. He'd said he needed me, that my mind was too brilliant to be wasted on someone else's company. He'd convinced me to stop working, to manage our life, instead, framing it as a promotion. "You're the CEO of us," he'd said. And I, dizzy with love and the sheer force of his conviction, had believed him. For 7 years I had willfully suppressed the part of my brain that questioned things. I'd ignored the instinct that had once been my greatest asset. Now, holding that piece of paper, I could feel it waking up, stretching its limbs after a long drugged sleep. I waited until that evening to ask him about it. He was in his study, a room paneled in dark, glossy wood that always smelled of leather and accomplishment. He was sipping a glass of Macallan 18, scrolling through his phone with an air of detached amusement. The lamplight caught the silver in his dark hair, making him look distinguished, trustworthy. A pillar of the community. My husband. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. I held up the envelope. "This came for Oakhaven Legacy Partners." I was about to toss it, but I saw the logo. His eyes flicked up from his phone, and for a split second, I saw it. A flicker of something cold and sharp, like a shard of ice in the warm amber of his whiskey. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a soft, indulgent smile. "Ah, that. It's nothing, baby. Just a holding company for a few speculative investments. Boring stuff. You'd be bored to tears." He waved a dismissive hand, the gesture designed to make me feel small, silly for even asking. This was his method. I recognized it now as a well-worn tool. He didn't overtly forbid. He simply framed my curiosity as a charming, but ultimately pointless, feminine foible. My questions were cute. My concerns were overthinking. It was a masterful way of shutting me down without ever raising his voice. But the accountant in me was awake now, and she was stubborn. "Son, I'm not bored by it," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I just didn't know you had any holding companies. We've never talked about it." And tied. A long, put-upon sound. He set his whiskey glass down with a heavy click. "Clara, honestly, what's there to talk about? It's a legal structure to minimize tax liability on some high-risk plays. It's completely separate from our personal finances. I handle the complicated money stuff so you don't have to worry your pretty little head about it." There it was, your pretty little head. The verbal pat on the head, the gentle, loving dismissal that was, in reality, a cage. My blood ran cold. My pretty little head used to unravel multi-million-dollar fraud schemes for a living, Julian. I think I can handle the concept of a holding company. The shift in the room was palpable. The air grew thick and heavy. The indulgent smile vanished from his face, leaving behind something hard and unfamiliar. He stood up, and he was a good 6 inches taller than me, a fact he always seemed to use to his advantage in moments like these. He walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of me, looking down. "Is that what this is about?" he asked, his voice low and laced with a strange, mocking pity. "You miss your little job? You miss playing with spreadsheets and feeling important?" The words were designed to hurt, to find the specific insecurity he himself had cultivated in me and press on it until it bruised. For years he'd told me my old job was a source of stress, that I was happier now, that our life was better because I was fully dedicated to it. Now, he was using my sacrifice as a weapon. "This isn't about my old job," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I hated that it was trembling. "This is about you having a secret company. It's about transparency, Julian. We're married. Our finances should be an open book." It wasn't a real laugh. It was a sharp, ugly bark of a sound that held no humor. "An open book? My God, you're naive. Clara, look around you." He swept his arm out, gesturing at the expensive room, the view, the life he had built. "This doesn't happen with an open book. You make difficult, aggressive decisions you aren't equipped to understand. This house, your car, the clothes you're wearing, the club memberships, the vacations. It all exists because I do what's necessary." I stared at him, my mind struggling to reconcile the man in front of me with the one who held my hand at dinner parties and told our friends I was his rock, his everything. The cognitive dissonance was a physical force, making my head spin. I loved him. This man was a stranger. Both things couldn't be true. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying," he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, chilling whisper, "that you have no idea how this world works. And you're better off that way. I've given you a perfect life. A life your little forensic accounting salary could never have even touched. You live in a palace I built, and you don't have to lift a finger. All I ask is that you don't question the engineering that holds it all up." The arrogance was stunning. It was so pure, so absolute, it was almost impressive. But underneath the arrogance, I heard the real message, the one that finally pierced through 7 years of carefully constructed fantasy. "You are nothing without me. You are dependent, you are weak, and you will stay that way. And so I'm just supposed to sit here and be pretty and not ask questions?" I felt a surge of cold fury, a defiance I hadn't felt in years. "Is that my role? The CEO of us?" I spat the words back at him. His eyes narrowed. The mask was completely gone now. I was looking at the real Julian, and he was terrifying. "Our sure role," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "is to be grateful. You have no idea what I've risked, what I continue to risk every single day to maintain this. You think you're my partner? You're not my partner. You're my single greatest luxury, and a very, very expensive one at that." He picked up his whiskey, took a sip, and looked at me over the rim of the glass. "So yes, stop asking questions. Stop poking your nose into things that don't concern you. Just enjoy the ride. It's what you're good at." He turned his back on me then, dismissing me completely, and returned to his phone as if the conversation was over. As if he had just explained a simple household chore and not ripped the entire foundation of our marriage to shreds. I stood there for a full minute, frozen. The air in my lungs felt like it had turned to ice. Every loving word he'd ever said, every tender gesture, every shared dream. It all replayed in my mind, but now it was tainted, twisted into something grotesque. It wasn't a partnership. It was a transaction. I had given him my ambition, my independence, my very identity, and in return, he had given me a golden cage and called it love. I backed out of the study without another word. He didn't even look up. I walked through our silent, perfect house, my bare feet cold on the polished concrete floors. I saw everything with new eyes. The abstract art on the walls wasn't ours, it was his. The first edition books on the shelves weren't ours. They were his. I was a decoration, a beautiful, expensive, and utterly powerless object he'd acquired. My single greatest luxury. The words echoed in the sudden, vast emptiness of my own mind. I went into the guest bathroom, the one with the Calcutta gold marble and the ridiculously overpriced Aesop soap. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with a horror so profound it hadn't even registered as tears yet. I saw the woman Julian saw, soft, complacent, a little lost. The woman who gave up her career for a man. The woman who let herself be convinced that managing a social calendar was a fulfilling substitute for a life's work. And in that moment, something inside me broke, or maybe it was fixed. The cold fury I'd felt in his study began to solidify, to crystallize into something hard and clear. It was purpose. He thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He thought he had successfully erased the woman I used to be. He had built his kingdom on the assumption of my ignorance. And that was going to be the biggest miscalculation of his life. I took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at my reflection again. The lost look was gone, replaced by a glint of steel I recognized from a long time ago. The hunter was awake, and her first hunt was going to be her own husband. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I told him I had a migraine and went to the guest room, my new base of operations. He didn't protest. I doubt he even noticed. While he slept soundly in the bed we once shared, I sat in the dark with my laptop, the screen's glow casting long shadows on the wall. The password to his personal laptop was Claramalova22. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. It took me less than 10 minutes to bypass the firewalls on our home network and access his work server. He was arrogant. Arrogant people get sloppy. They believe their own hype, and their security protocols reflect that. They use their wife's name as a password. The Oakhaven Legacy Partners folder was right there. It wasn't even hidden. It was filled with dozens of subfolders, a labyrinth of legal documents, wire transfer confirmations, and encrypted spreadsheets. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. This was it. The point of no return. I opened the first file. It was a certificate of formation from the state of Delaware, the go-to for anyone wanting to create an anonymous shell corporation. The listed manager was a man named Arthur Vance, a name I'd never heard. I downloaded the document to a new encrypted flash drive I'd found in my old box of work things. A relic from my past life, now a tool for my future. I worked all night, fueled by a terrifying righteous energy. With every file I downloaded, every secret account I uncovered, the picture of the man I married grew darker, more monstrous. This wasn't just about minimizing a tax burden. The money flowing through Oakhaven was staggering. Millions. It was being moved in a complex, dizzying dance between offshore accounts in the Caymans and domestic investment portfolios. Money was coming out of his clients' managed funds and going into Oakhaven. He wasn't just hiding his own money, he was stealing theirs. By the time the first rays of dawn painted the Austin sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange, I had a flash drive containing a mountain of raw data that pointed to a massive, systematic fraud. He was a predator, and his clients, retirees who trusted him with their life savings, young families planning for their children's futures, were his prey. And I, his greatest luxury, had been living off the proceeds of their stolen dreams. The thought made me physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched, vomiting up the dregs of last night's expensive wine and gourmet dinner. When I was done, I rinsed my mouth and stared at my hollowed-out reflection. The disgust I felt was aimed as much at myself as it was at him. How had I not seen it? The lavish gifts that were just a little too lavish, the sudden, unexplained windfalls he'd laughed off as a killer trade. The way he charmed everyone, especially the older, more vulnerable clients. The signs had all been there. I had just chosen not to read them. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I needed a lawyer, but more than that, I needed a friend. There was only one person who fit both descriptions. I picked up my phone and sent a text. Lena. Are you awake? I need you. It's an emergency. Lena and I had met in my first year in Austin. Her daughter was in the same ballet class as the daughter of a woman from my yoga studio. We bonded over our shared bemusement at 4-year-olds attempting a plie. Lena was everything I had ceased to be: sharp, cynical, fiercely independent. She was a partner at a top law firm downtown, a litigator who ate narcissists like Julian for breakfast. We'd remained friends, but a distance had grown between us. A distance I now understood was created by Julian. He'd always made subtle digs about her, calling her aggressive or cynical, poisoning my perception of her strength, recasting it as a masculine flaw. He was isolating me, I realized. It was gaslighting 101. Her reply came back in less than a minute. Always awake. What's wrong? Where are you? My house, but it's not safe to talk here. Can we meet? My office, 7 a.m. Use the back entrance. I'll buzz you in. Don't bring your phone. The instruction was clear, professional, and chilling. Don't bring your phone. She already suspected I might be monitored. She knew the type. Of course she did. I slipped out of the house before Julian was awake, leaving my phone on the nightstand in the guest room. I drove my car, a pristine white SUV he'd bought me for my last birthday, and every inch of it felt dirty, contaminated. I felt like I was driving a getaway car from the scene of a crime I hadn't even known I was a part of. Lena's office was on the 30th floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky. The city was just waking up below, a river of red and white lights flowing along the interstate. She was waiting for me in a conference room with coffee and a box of pastries I knew I couldn't eat. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense knot. She looked like an avenging angel in Armani. She took one look at my face, and her professional demeanor softened. "Oh, honey, what did he do?" I opened my mouth to speak, but what came out was a sob, one single, ragged sound that carried 7 years of repressed doubt and willful blindness. And then the dam broke. I told her everything: the bank statement, the confrontation, the things he'd said to me, the names, the accounts, the sheer, breathtaking scale of the fraud I had uncovered in a single night. I talked for an hour straight, the words pouring out of me in a frantic, desperate flood. When I was done, I handed her the encrypted flash drive. She didn't say, "Told you so," though she would have been well within her rights. She just listened, her expression growing harder and more focused with every word I spoke. She took the flash drive, her movements precise. "Okay," she said, her voice calm and steady, a rock in my churning sea of panic. "Okay, Clara, here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to go back home and you are going to be the performance of your life. You are the loving, apologetic wife. You had a hormonal moment. You were stressed. You read the situation all wrong. You will grovel if you have to. His ego is our most valuable asset right now. We need him comfortable. We need him arrogant. We need him to believe you are exactly who he thinks you are." I nodded, my mind latching onto the instructions. A plan. I needed a plan. "Second," she continued, "I'm going to take this drive and I'm going to have a forensic team, my guys off the books, do a deep dive. We need to know exactly what we're looking at, the full scope, every dollar, every victim. Third, you need to start quietly separating anything that is yours and yours alone. Heirlooms, personal documents, anything with sentimental value. We're going to set you up a new bank account at a different bank under your maiden name. We're building you a lifeboat." "And then?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What happens then?" Lena leaned forward, her blue eyes filled with a terrifying, beautiful fire. "Then," she said, "you and I are going to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. We're not just going to divorce him, Clara. We are going to dismantle him. We're going to give the SEC and the FBI a gift-wrapped case so perfect, they'll build statues of us. He built his empire on the belief that you were his property. We're going to use his own twisted logic to prove that this property is in fact condemned." I looked at her, at the fierce loyalty in her eyes, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't feel like Julian's wife. I didn't feel like a luxury or a decoration. I felt like Clara, the real Clara, and I was about to get my life back, even if it meant becoming a ghost in my own home first. Going back to that house was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I walked in, and he was in the kitchen, making his morning smoothie. He looked up and his face was a mask of cold indifference. He was punishing me with his silence. The old me would have crumbled, would have rushed to apologize, to smooth things over, to do anything to get back in his good graces. The new me saw an opportunity. I took a deep breath, channeling every acting class I'd ever sneered at. I let my shoulders slump. I manufactured tears in my eyes. "Julian," I whispered, my voice thick with fake regret. "I am so sorry about last night," he asked, his voice flat. "Yes, I don't know what got into me. I think I've just been feeling a little useless lately, and I took it out on you. It was hormonal and stupid, and I was completely out of line." I walked over and put my hand on his arm. His muscles were tense. "You're right. I don't need to worry about that stuff. I trust you, completely. I was just being insecure. Can you forgive me?" It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I was laying it on so thick I was practically suffocating in my own bullshit. And he, in his infinite narcissistic arrogance, bought every single word. He turned around slowly. He searched my face, looking for any sign of deception, but all he saw was what he wanted to see: his weak, emotional, pliable wife put back in her place. A faint, satisfied smile touched his lips. He was the king, and his subject was bowing before him once more. "So know you were, baby," he said, his voice softening, full of condescending magnanimity. He pulled me into a hug. "I forgive you. Let's just forget it ever happened. I'll handle the real world. You just keep making our world beautiful." I buried my face in his chest, inhaling the scent of his expensive cologne, and fought the urge to gag. I could feel his heart beating, steady and strong, the heart of a man who believed he was utterly invincible. Over his shoulder, I looked around my beautiful gilded cage, and I smiled a small secret smile. "Game on," I thought. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The next few weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I played the part of the doting, brainless housewife to perfection. I organized dinner parties, I went to charity luncheons, I redecorated the living room. I smiled and nodded, and acted as if Oakhaven Legacy Partners was a forgotten dream. All the while, I was a spy in my own life. Lena's instructions were my Bible. I bought a burner phone, paying cash. I used the public library's Wi-Fi for our communications. I started meticulously, secretly photographing every document in his study, every statement, every piece of mail. I became an expert in his routines, knowing exactly when I had a 20-minute window to slip into his office while he was on a conference call. The adrenaline was a constant companion, a sharp, metallic taste in the back of my throat. At home, Julian's behavior became a textbook cycle of narcissistic abuse. Now that he believed he'd put me back in my box, he entered the love-bombing phase. He brought me flowers, extravagant gifts, whispered how he couldn't live without me. He was re-establishing control, reinforcing the fantasy. A week later, he would devalue me, making a casual, cutting remark about my intelligence or my judgment in front of our friends. A small public humiliation designed to keep me insecure and dependent on his approval. I learned to ride the waves of his personality disorder like a surfer. I'd absorb the praise without believing it and deflect the insults without internalizing them. Each one of his manipulations was just more data for my case. I documented it all in a locked file on my burner phone, a diary of his pathology. Lena's team, meanwhile, was working miracles. They had decrypted the spreadsheets. The reality was worse than I'd imagined. Julian wasn't just skimming. He was running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. He was using money from new investors to pay dividends to older ones, creating the illusion of massive returns. The entire structure was a house of cards, and Oakhaven was the slush fund where he hid the money he was bleeding from the core of the scheme to fund our lavish life. The victims weren't just wealthy tech bros. They were teachers, firefighters, elderly widows.